Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major! Hello, welcome to Almost Major, the podcast where we talk about films made by distributed by many major studios. My name is Bryden Doyle. I'm here with my co-host Kevin Tudor.
Hey.
And Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And our special guest returning to be with us after the first double feature of Van Wilder and Boat Trip. They've come back now for a double feature of two, I think we could call better movies, Buffalo 66 and Jesus' Son. We have Michael Snydel coming back. Michael, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me back. They might be a little bit better than those two you previously mentioned.
We've given you a Purple Heart. You were wounded in the past two episodes you were on.
I pressed record and it says, please ask the host to give you permission to record.
No, you're supposed to record on Audacity.
I am recording on GarageBand as well, but that's just my mic.
Yeah,
stuff.
That's fine.
Is that fine? Okay. I'm just making sure.
Now we have to start all
we
over.
We don't have to redo.
God
we don't
damn
at all.
No,
Bryden did it perfect in one take. He's like Michelle Pfeiffer with that whip scene in Batman Returns.
Sure.
I'll take it, yeah.
Bryden whip scene from Batman Returns Doyle, yeah. The yearbook was just like, we have to put the entire name? Are you kidding me?
It's going to be tough to put on business cards.
I'm trying to think of like the most famous one take things. I don't know. I feel like there's got to be one huge one that people go to.
Maybe it's on my mind because he passed away today, or the news broke that he passed away today, but Jean-Luc Godard's Weekend with that extended tracking shot of the cars.
Did they only do that once, though?
I don't know.
Yeah, because that's the difference of one take. It's just like, Pfeiffer did that, they only shot it once, and they were just like, yeah, that's great. That's all we need. I would hope that scene in Weekend was only one take, but...
He just for a very long time.
He just started that car accident. That's what happened. He just got the camera.
Every single time he's just like, get the cars together and break and get everything.
Yeah, it's like in that scene in The Good Son, he just got like a small boy to throw a dummy off of the bridge. And they were just like, and he was just like, roll with it, go! Yeah.
I need to rewatch The Good Son.
Oh my gosh.
I have seen The Good Son more than once, and it is...
Who did The Good Son?
Joseph Rubin, who did The Stepfather.
Oh, wow, that tracks.
The Stepfather.
That's a pretty good movie, yeah.
Wait, the remake of The Stepfather, right?
No, the original with Terry O'Quinn.
No shit.
And he also did... Sorry, go ahead.
The remake has a Nip Tuck guy. What's his name?
Yeah, Dylan McDermott. No.
Walsh.
The other guy.
Dylan Walsh. Yeah.
Dylan Walsh. It's another Dylan.
Yeah.
He also did The Forgotten with Julianne Moore, which I saw in theaters.
I downloaded that on a cam rip and LimeWire in 2004. Yeah.
When we had Julianne Moore at the Coolidge Corner Theater for our Coolidge Award for her, that was not one of the posters we put up when she came to...
You could say it was Forgotten.
What about prize winner of Defiance, Ohio? Was that one of them?
I think, wasn't that like a TV movie? We did not. No, we didn't put up...
I rented that at some point. I remember watching that with my mom. Dad, I don't know.
We didn't put up that. We didn't put up Blindness. I don't know if we put up Hannibal, but we showed it as a midnight. Yeah. Anyway, she was as wonderful as you'd expect. Love her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine Julianne Moore in Buffalo 66.
Oh, Jesus.
Good
There's
transition.
also a clip now that we consistently quote in jest now, because there's an intro for Welcome to the Coolidge Corner Theater, and there's like just a montage of things that have happened, like live events, and there's a clip of Julianne Moore going, I saw a racer head here. So now whenever we walk by and we're shutting the doors for when a movie's about to start, we'll just all go,
I saw a racer head here and everybody was high.
You need to put that quip in the intro of Almost Major.
Almost Major.
You just add it into that little...
I saw
Get
Soul
your little
Survivors
stinger bit.
here. Yeah.
We have turned it into a bit of a meme, the pharmacy scene in Magnolia, like where she's screaming at people. We just put an "I saw a racer head here" like at the pharmacy.
I'm gonna pass out. Anyways,
as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are talking about Buffalo 66 as our first movie. It premiered at Sundance in January 1998, and then opened to 2 theaters on June 26th in 1998, and expanded at 58 theaters. It was nominated for the Grand Jury Prizes at the Sundance Film Festival and for Best First Feature at the Indie Spirit Awards. It was made for a budget of $1.5 million. It made $39,555 in its opening weekend, and led to a domestic and overall gross of $2.3 million. The top 5 films that came out the opening weekend were Dr. Dolittle,
yeah,
Mulan, The X-Files, with the subtitle I did not know about, The X-Files, Fight the Future.
Fight the Future.
Mm-hmm.
Out of Sight, great movie, and The Truman Show. The number 1 song in the U.S. in this week was The Boy Is Mine by Brandy and Monica.
Yeah, I think that's Timbaland.
that was number 1 for like 18 weeks.
It's a good song.
Oh, yeah.
And then the number 1 song in Canada this week is Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. And interestingly enough, the video for Torn was directed by Alison McLean, who directed Jesus' Son, which we will be talking about next week.
She only did like 2, maybe 3 music videos, and they're mostly all for Natalie Imbruglia. It's really weird.
It is.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
What are the thoughts on Torn? I think Torn's a pretty good song. I know some people kind of
It's fucking fantastic.
Oh, no,
it's
Torn
fantastic.
rules.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a great remake she did maybe 5 years ago on an album where she did some covers, and then she did a cover of Torn, and it's a really damn good cover of her own song.
And that's a very distinctive music video that I remember seeing in my youth, so big ups to McLean.
There we go. Buffalo 66 going. It revolves around Billy Brown, who is played by Vincent Gallo, the writer-director of the film. He has just been released from prison. He has a visit planned with his parents where they will meet his wife, although Billy does not actually have a wife. So he kidnaps Layla, played by Christina Ricci, and makes her pose as his wife for his visit with his parents. Like I said, the film is written and directed by Vincent Gallo. This is his first time directing a feature film. He has a lot of short films stretching back to 1980. After this, he makes The Brown Bunny in 2003. And Buffalo 66 was also co-written by Alison Bagnall, who went on to write and direct The Dish and the Spoon, a film with Greta Gerwig in 2011. I have not seen that. I would like to check it out. If it's if anywhere near as good as Buffalo 66, I'd be very curious to see it.
Yeah.
The film stars, like I said, Vincent Gallo as Billy Brown. Some of his other roles include Palookaville in 1995, Trouble Every Day in 2001, Tetro in 2009, and Essential Killing in 2010. Christina Ricci, she plays Layla. Before this, she is in Addams Family and Addams Family Values from 1991 to 1993. Casper in 1995, The Ice Storm in 1997. The same year that she's in Buffalo 66, she's also in Pecker, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and then following that, she's in Sleepy Hollow in 1999, Prozac Nation, and All Over the Guy in 2001. All Over the Guy, by the way, that's something we're going to be talking about later on in this miniseries for Lionsgate. She's also on Monster in 2003, and she's currently on Yellow Jackets, which she is phenomenal on.
She's so good.
I need to watch that show.
I do too.
Especially since Elijah Wood and Lauren Ambrose are going to be on the next season too.
Oh man,
I'm just
that's such good casting.
So much teenage nostalgia in just those 2 people alone, let alone the rest of the cast who's been on the first season.
Yeah. Also featured in the film, Ben Gazzara as Jimmy Brown. Prior to this, he's in Husbands in 1970 and Killing of a Chinese Bookie in 1976. St. Jack in 1979, The Big Lebowski and Happiness in 1998. After this, something called Hysterical Blindness, which I'm not familiar with, and Dogville.
That's Mira Nair, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I should check it out.
It was an HBO movie. I've seen it. It's Uma Thurman and who else is on Yellow Jackets? What's her name?
Juliette
I did a
Lewis.
fucking episode. Yeah, Juliette Lewis.
Yes, I remember you talking about this movie on that episode. Yes, I'll have to see that. Yeah. And he's also in Dogville in 2003, which we'll be covering again for Lionsgate miniseries. And then we also have Angelica Houston as Jan Brown. Before this, she's in The Witches in 1990. She's in Addams Family and Addams Family Values with Christina Ricci. She's in Royal Tenenbaums in 2001 and John Wick 3 in 2019.
I am going to lay my cards on the table here. I have seen Addams Family Values at least 10 times throughout my adolescence. Good. I didn't even think about how Anjelica Huston was Christina Ricci's mom in that movie while watching this, which is insane. It didn't even cross my mind. Once you said that, I was just like, oh, duh. I couldn't believe I didn't even think about that watching this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of, I always find that nice when actors sort of reunite on these role projects.
I mean, it's a testament to both of their performances and the film itself, but that's wild. Didn't even cross my mind.
Their natural chemistry makes even more sense.
Oh, yeah. You mean the chemistry in which Anjelica Huston barely looks at her throughout the entire movie?
So good.
But warmly.
And now, onto trivia for the film. There's a lot here. Thank you, Kevin, for the research. The house where Billy Brown's parents live in the film is actually the very same house where Vincent Gallo lived with his parents growing up. Of the $1.5 million budget, $20,000 is spent on Anjelica Huston's wig alone. That is a lot of money.
Jesus.
Mickey Rourke was going through tough times indeed with both his career and his finances at the time the film was being made. According to an interview, Rourke stated that Gallo offered him a small part in the movie and paid him with a paper bag containing $100,000. Oh my gosh, the paper bag, that's a perfect detail.
And also, that's I don't know the percentage, but that's 1/15 of your budget for less than a minute of screen time.
He's good in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just imagining Bugs Bunny being the person he meets up with when it just has a $sign on it while he's just hooking up.
That's incredible. Christina Ricci choreographed her tap dance in the bowling alley scene. It's pretty good choreography. Original cinematographer Dick Pope, who has shot a lot of Mike Leigh movies and also The Way of the Gun, a previous almost major title, he was fired during pre-production for opposing Vincent Gallo's decision to shoot on reversal film. Gallo intended to act as cinematographer himself, but the Bond company ensuring the film would not allow it, so Gallo then hired Lance Acord, who is at the time a non-union cinematographer who had never shot a feature. I think since then he's gone on to shoot a lot of Spike Jonze movies.
He did Lost in Translation and Marie Antoinette.
He's got a huge career. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Christina Ricci and Lance Acord both had difficult working relationships with Vincent Gallo, resulting in Gallo publicly disparaging him after the film's release, calling Ricci a puppet and overweight, and Acord a button pusher. Anjelica Huston also did not get along with him, and Gallo claimed Huston caused the film to be turned down by the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Sure.
And I guess he won in the end because Brown Bunny ended up going to Cannes.
To rapturous applause. Everyone loved it.
Yes. And that's where
Especially Roger Ebert.
Yeah. And that's where he did end up, I think, I was reading, he ended up acting as his own cinematographer on that, so he really was the whole author of that one. Yeah. The song Billy's father sings to Layla, Foolish Russian, Where Angels Fear to Tread, was actually sung by Vincent Gallo's father, Vincent Gallo Sr. Pretty good song, I must say. Nice job on the vocals there. Gallo decided to shoot on reversal stock, which is the equivalent of color transparency film, which is expensive both to buy and process, without even knowing if the stock was available in 35mm or if any labs were capable of developing it. Kevin Corrigan originally turned down the role of Goon, or Rocky, as he likes to be called, because he was uncomfortable with it. He later changed his mind and asked for the role back. Gallo had hired another actor to play the role, but fired him and rehired Corrigan. After filming, Corrigan was still uncomfortable with his performance and asked to be uncredited.
Just so much rigmarole to eventually at the end just be like, you know what, I still don't like it. Sorry.
Of all the people in the movie, too, I mean, we'll talk about this, but he doesn't come off that bad in this movie or anything. It's a good performance, and his character is he's kind of a dillweed, but it's fine. He's
a nice dillweed. He cares about his friend.
Yeah.
What a dillweed. I love Kevin Corrigan though. It's always so fun.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah. Big fan.
during an interview in 2017, when a reporter asked Christina Ricci if Vincent Gallo was difficult to work with on this film, she said that he insisted her mother, who would chaperone her, stay away during filming, and that he would regularly scream at her during the shoot. When the reporter asked her if she thought a situation like that, i.e. a very young woman working largely alone with someone who is notoriously creepy, would be allowed on sets these days, Ricci replied, "Just because he's bad at hiding it doesn't mean other people aren't really good at hiding it. Everybody's creepy. He just happens to be really loud about it, and he's not even that creepy. He's just kind of a jerk, but he's not lascivious." So, glowing praise.
Look, he's an
quote,
asshole,
honestly.
but, I mean, you know, it's not like he's the worst to ever live, but he's also not that good. It's like, thanks? I don't know.
It is like weirdly somewhat complimentary at a certain point, because she could have very easily been like, "Oh, he's a waste of space," but she's like, I mean, like, he's talented, but he fucking sucks. Like, that's what
She didn't even say he was talented.
I also wonder, because she was 17 at the time, like, if she was just like, how much will I say that will get me in trouble? Like how much can I say without getting in trouble here, you know?
Sure.
Well, this was 2017, so...
Oh, this was,
this
10
is in
years
2017.
later.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, she had more of a safety net at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was Time Out London, is what it looks like.
Gotcha. And it's interesting that you mentioned her age at the time of making the movie, because the next trivia thing is Ben Gazzara ad-libbed the part where he shows his face between Christina Ricci's breasts at the dinner table. You can very much sense her discomfort in this scene. I mean, it works for the character, but that's a little upsetting to know that that was an ad-lib part. That is something you should definitely go over with your actors when you're making a movie. Gallo also then... Gallo had his own side of the story, of course. He wrote in 2018, "Christina Ricci was my friend during the filming of Buffalo 66, and working with her made sense and felt natural. Don't think she likes the finished film much. During the film's release, she didn't do much to support it. Instead, she pushed another film of hers called Opposite of Sex, which was released around the same time. Without Christina's strong support, things were much harder regarding the release of Buffalo 66, and it forced me to generate interest in the film on my own. I hold grudges sometimes, and I had that a little bit with Christina for reasons that I may have exaggerated. I insulted her jokingly one day to a friend, and a sneaky gossip writer overheard me. Christina and I have not spoken since. There are a lot of people I don't like, and I have no problem calling out. Christina is not one of them."
Jokingly calling somebody overweight and a puppet. I love doing that.
Yeah.
Also, I love that
You don't do that to your friends? I do that. I call my coworkers that every day when I walk into work. Yeah, Jesus.
I also love that, like, he's doing the Kevin Bacon thing where he says, like, our movie got overshadowed by, like, something else. Where he said, like, Stuart Echoes got overshadowed by Sixth Sense. It's like, Buffalo 66 got
Imagine
overshadowed by Opposite of Sex.
sex.
Gosh. Just
Also,
like a classic.
she's like the headliner for I haven't seen Opposite of Sex, but she's
fine.
the headliner for it, right?
Mm-hmm. She's on the poster. Yeah.
I've heard Lisa Kudrow was like really good in that movie.
Yes.
And I think she got a Globe nomination too.
No shit.
Yeah.
Is it as good as Lucky Numbers, though?
Nothing can be as good as Lucky Numbers.
Good question. Put them on a double bill.
What is this? Is this a shifter car? You think that's funny? I'm used to luxury cars. I drive cars that shift themselves. My cars shift themselves. I need you to come to my parents' house with me and pretend to be my wife.
Did Billy ever tell you how we met? Billy's the nicest husband in the whole world.
Don't touch me.
What do you mean, don't touch me?
Don't
You're supposed to
touch
be
me.
husband and wife. No, really. I'm the luckiest girl.
What did you say? 1, 2, 3, get out of the car.
I fell madly in love with him.
They haven't won a championship since 1966, and I missed that game because that's the day I had Billy.
Did you like Buffalo too?
If you fail to convince the court, then very evil and very bad things are going to happen.
Didn't you go to jail or something? Yeah, but he was innocent.
Remember that guy Wood?
No good.
I'd really like to find him.
You still gonna do that bad thing you said you were gonna do?
He missed that field goal on purpose. He got paid money, and he missed it on purpose.
They tell somebody turn up the heat.
Where's the girl?
I'm his wife.
She's not my wife. What did I just tell you?
I'm not looking, just imagining.
I picked her up hitchhiking. I'm a free guy, you know, that's not my style.
These photos are us in love, spanning time. Just look like you like me. That's it. Can you do that?
So now, look, I think this is the part of the show where we get into initial thoughts. Michael, I think as your guest, you should go first to talk about your initial thoughts on Buffalo 66. Please.
Okay. So I mean, like, this is a love or hate it movie. I mean, it's fascinating looking back at the time, and we'll probably talk about it later. But Roger Ebert had a very vocal beef with Vincent Gallo. But then you also had people like Jonathan Rosenbaum who gave it like a 0.5 out of 5, and a lot of prominent critics at the time. So it is fascinating because it has become, this poster child for a certain type of independent film. So, and the thing is that, like, this was at Sundance, and there is nothing about this movie that feels like Sundance. And that's what I'll say is, that's kind of my opening statement, is like, I think this movie is kind of brilliant, and I also hated almost every minute of it because it is so obnoxious in every sense of the word, from the characterization to the editing to the dismissal of grammar to just like, from everything, it feels like a movie from someone who truly said, I am doing this in my own way. And so that's cool, but it's also, I'm not going to be formalist and say, let's just say that Vincent Gallo's real life persona seems to sure as hell feed into Billy Brown in Buffalo 66. And I think that there are a lot of brilliant choices in here. I think there's some great performances. I think there is just consistently, this is a unpredictable movie in a way that I can also say, oh, I see filmmakers who saw this and, they were radicalized by it. Like, it's impossible to not see something like the Safdies in this. Like, it's
100%.
Yeah, like, and I guess that's the one I'll mention. But
I did.
So it's.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I checked my Letterboxd ratings, and I saw that Sean Baker logged this film and said, I revisit this classic often. And then I was like, oh, of course, you made Red Rocket, which has the same type of relationship between its central characters.
Exactly, yeah.
Like maybe they're not outright fucking like they are in Red Rocket, but it is absolutely the same type of, I'm going to take this underage girl under my wing, and instead of them being appalled, they're going to be into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, just in every sense, it's like a lovers on the run. Like, by all accounts, it should be the most generic imaginable thing. And it's just not. But wow, it is incredibly obnoxious. But I know ultimately I'm going to sound like I really like this movie, but there were a lot of times where I was like, fuck you.
I remember you texted me while you were watching it at points today, and you were like, this is brilliant. I hate it.
You gotta hand it to Gallo for me. It's like you have to hand it to him. Like, I wrote in my notes. Damn it, even the songs are good. Like, I was like, it says songs like Gallo. I'm like, I like the music. Like, that's the thing.
That's so good.
And I know I'm roasting you a bit, Michael, but I'm also in a similar boat. Not to play my own hand, but yeah.
No, sure. We'll talk way more about this, but I just think, this was just like, by the end of it, I was like, oh man, I remember when independent film, like, it meant something, like, not to be that person, but it's, and we'll get into it, but this and Jesus' Son, I think, are two examples where I was just like, oh man, remember when independent film felt truly
It
alive.
had an identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's what I can't say about this. I'm gonna have a lot of things to say about how annoying Vincent Gallo's character in the filmmaking is in here, but there's nothing generic about this.
No. Yeah.
That's what I will say.
Yeah. Kevin, why don't you go next? I know you also have a lot of strong feelings about this movie too.
Oh yeah. I love this movie so much, and this rewatch made me love it even more. The cinematography of it is some of my all-time favorite. I love the way this movie looks, and just so many, there's a lot of showy cinematography in it, but there's just also just very basic shot setup that with the lighting, it makes it just like astounding. Like when Gazara is singing and like the lights dim down and there's a red light on. Give me all of that shit. Oh my god. Oh, it's so good. It's a very complicated movie, but both within the story and everything outside the film. And it's really weird because like the protagonist is just like truly a loser, but as the film progresses, you start to notice this is all an act, and like Ricci notices it almost immediately. Like she starts smiling when he can't figure out how to drive a manual, and it's just like she can even already see through this guy.
Yeah.
So all of his anger and whatnot that comes out, I never feel it as like actual anger. It's more times than not, it's fucking hilarious because it's just like I don't drive these type of cars. I drive luxury cars. Mercedes Benz. Ever heard of that?
The hands.
It's
always
fucking
using his
hilarious.
Hands.
Yeah, it's fucking hilarious. Then it becomes like, because like for 90% of it, you're just like, God, this guy's just insufferable, and the other 10%, you're just like, God, I feel really bad for him. And then it'll go right back to the 90%. Like, he's basically just stuck as a kid. Like, in his bowling locker room, there's an article about him winning a tournament, and the picture is him as a boy. The only pictures his parents have of him as a boy, and it's a picture that just reminds Billy that his parents are terrible and his dad murdered his dog. Ricci even says he looks like a little boy in the bathtub, and he gets in the fetal position in bed with her. And the only girl he's pretty much ever talked to is a girl in 3rd grade that he's fixated about for like 20 years. Even the gun he has looks like a fucking toy gun. Like, he's a little boy. And yeah, like I was saying, this movie's fucking hilarious, and all the supporting characters are just so damn good. Like, Houston is just so good at not paying attention to anything. She's so good. Like watching a game from like 20 years ago, like that's insane. Like, anyways, because we never learn about Ricci's background, we have to learn about her from how she reacts to Gallo, and that could toe the line. And it does go through here, and it also doesn't, of like she's the pure woman that's going to save him and blah blah blah. But it's kind of the thing is like, is it Stockholm syndrome, or is she just as damaged as him? Maybe both. Is she just a manic pixie dream girl? Maybe all three. And I can totally get the manic pixie dream girl complaints on this, but I also think this film is actively making fun of Billy for the way he is, and isn't being super serious all the time of how fucked up he is, and he just needs someone to save him. It's a lot more than that, but I totally understand not vibing with it. But it's 100% my vibe. I love it so much. The fucking strip club scene set to Heart of the Sunrise is just fucking gangbusters. Oh, it's so good.
And that trailer set to it is just like it. I mean, before I even saw the movie, I watched that trailer and I was just like, this like looks. It's just like so striking how it's like all just like still frames
so
basically.
Good.
Yeah, it's set to that song.
Yeah. That was the first time. I was talking in the group chat. I was just like, I remember watching a VHS and that trailer showed up, and I had to have been like 7 or 8, and I was just like, whatever this is, I'm gonna have to wait a while but it looks interesting, but I know I'm too young for this, whatever the fuck it is. I wish I knew what the fucking VHS it was, but yeah, I always remembered that trailer, and yeah, it still rules.
Okay.
But that's initial thoughts. I fucking love it so much.
When did you first see it, Kevin? I'm curious.
I'm gonna say like 6-7 years ago. When I was at OU, I screened it for a film series I did, and then I think right around that time I was like, oh, let me watch Brown Bunny. Let me see what that's about. It's the most boring movie I've ever seen. But so this is my 3rd time watching it, I think, and yeah, I've loved it more and more every single time.
How did OU that screening? How did they react to it?
Oh, they loved it. That was also the same series where I showed House and I showed Possibly in Michigan beforehand, so I was just going nuts. I also showed Gummo, that film series, so hell yeah.
Okay.
What was the theme of the series? Really, I'm curious
it was just every Thursday they were just like, yeah, we have a room and you can just show whatever, so I just showed whatever.
That rolls.
So cool.
Yeah. They were like, we have a popcorn machine, you can make popcorn too, and I was just like, awesome, let's go. Yeah.
You're set.
Yeah. But Bryden, this is your first time. I think it's everybody's first time besides me, right?
Yes.
For me, yeah, it was my first time.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this really knocked me on my ass. I you know, it's wild. I mean, especially because like Gallo, it's funny. I had only seen him in a couple of movies, like the Claire Denis films, and I guess he's technically credited in Goodfellas. I could not find him in that movie, but like, yeah, he's not really an actor. But like, I was more familiar with his like public persona of him just being kind of an insufferable asshole. So like, it's kind of the thing where you go in like maybe a little bit guarded, but like, right from the start. I mean, yeah, this movie, like, it's funny if you read like the premise of this movie. It's like, you know, a guy gets out of prison and he like forces a girl to pretend to be his wife, and you look at the tagline too, where it's like, he just got out of prison, now he's going back to prison with his parents or something like that. Like, that's his own kind of prison, and it's like, just sounds like so fucking hacky and everything. But then like,
that's a tagline for Meet the Parents.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. But like, what's so striking right from the start of the movie is like how like just achingly sad this movie is, where like it is like, you know, like the sort of tinny vocals on like the song that like Gallo records, where it's like, you know, he's like still that little boy and everything. It's like holding on the shot of like him as a kid, like in probably like one of his few moments of happiness is like a kid with his dog Bingo, and then you know, like stuck in a photo and everything. And it's interesting too, like how the movie is like about like sort of being stuck in time and everything, and like, you know, like wanting to sort of the futility of trying to like recreate the past or change the past and everything. I mean, it's, you know, it's telling that like, you know, Angelica Houston's character is like trying to rewind like the football game that she knows the outcome of every time, and she still gets mad about the outcome every time or whatever, even though she knows she can't change it. And it really takes like but like it also like the movie is undermining Billy for how like silly he is like a lot of the time. I mean, Kevin, you talk about like how like the things he says are really funny, but it's also funny how like his impatience, like it'll just be like he will view every target of annoyance as of equal importance, where he's like saying to Christina Ricci, he's like, fuck you and your fucking hot chocolate and everything, as if like they're the two things that are of equal annoyance. But like it also, I mean, the movie is so striking, I think, with like the opening where he gets out of prison, and like you see like just like how like the trauma, I don't know, like the movie doesn't really get into specifics about like his prison experiences, but just like the way that like all these little square images of his time in prison, of him like crying in the shower, and all like the guard who was just like watching him sternly and everything, it all just like starts to like swallow up the frame and everything, and how like he just like, this guy's just like constantly living with like all these messed up feelings like in his life and everything. And I find that really quite powerful, how like it's always just like swallowing his life and drowning out everything, preventing him from any kind of happiness. And then the way at the end of the movie where that technique sort of comes back and reverses itself, where it's like, you know, like sort of the square image, and then it shrinks and he's able to be back in sort of like the full frame without all of that. I find that really, there is like a weird kind of amount of hopefulness in the movie, even as it is like constantly like taking you into just like his self-loathing. And yeah, like you said, Kevin, the lighting in this movie is so striking. I mean, like the way, like the moments of, you know, just sort of like fantastical like scenes where like it is like characters like taking the spotlight almost, and like having like their own sort of performances where they are able to, you know, have their own moments of stardom. I mean, Michael, in your Letterboxd review, you had the phrase "king for a frame," which is I think like a perfect way to describe it. Like everyone has like their own moment where they want to like have like just like the one moment of past that they can recreate, whether it's the dad recreating this moment as like a singer, and, you know, Billy wants to be a bowling champion, and then Christina Ricci, she's aspiring to be a dancer, and it's like, it's all just like a fleeting escape, and there's like just something so tragic about that, how like it's like they have their one moment of happiness that they can't make last. And yeah, all the performances are just like, so everyone just, you could easily imagine these characters descending into cartoon, you know, stereotypes and everything, especially like the sort of like henpecking mom, and like the dad who's just sort of like gruff and doesn't really talk a whole lot, but like all of it feels like so lived in. And, you know, like even like characters will like pop up just for like one scene, you know, like Jan Michael Vincent as like sort of like the gruff voiced bowling alley employee who like just like you immediately get like a sense of like the warmth of that relationship, and like it treats it as so genuine. And it's, I don't know, I this movie is just like it's such a, Michael, you talk about how this movie is obnoxious, and I could see how like it could be the bad kind of obnoxious, where it's like too. It could be like either too sickly sweet or too like nasty to even be enjoyable, and how it just like manages to walk that line. I mean, yeah, you gotta like hand it to Gallo for like pulling it off, and like his and you know maybe it's his co-writing partner too. I mean, I'd like to give credit to her too, you know, for you know whatever contribution she might have brought, but like yeah, it is just like kind of incredible that this movie exists in the way that it does and pulls it off so well. I'll stop my thoughts there because I want to hear what Charlie has to say about the movie, and what his first impressions were of this movie.
I'm basically gonna mirror a bit of what everybody said here. I had heard about how great this movie was from multiple people throughout several years. And I still hadn't seen it. And by the time I found out that Vincent Gallo is basically an fucking edgelord at this point. I mean, just going out and saying in interviews, oh, giving women the right to vote was a mistake. Like, I was just like, I don't want to fucking engage with this shit. Like, I don't, you know, and it really turned me off. And then when we were assigned to do this on the pod, I was like, okay, this is going to challenge you. And that's what art does. And, like Michael, I was also went into it being like, I'm going to be resistant to this, which is a bias I don't like to admit. But I really, because again, there's that whole cliche of like, you should go into everything with an open mind. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes, especially in the year 2022, you can't go into a film with a completely open mind if you've read certain things about how the filmmaker, star, writer, director is a Trump supporter and just saying horribly nasty things. And I found this utterly engrossing, and I immediately like I had my guard up, and I hate to admit that, but I was just like, fuck. I was talking about it with people at work today because I was just like, I just watched this for the first time, and I think Vincent Gallo is such a piece of shit, but like this movie's really good, right? He's like, no, they're like, oh no, it's great, like like it's so good, and it did. I've been wrestling with this movie and how much I liked it for the past couple days. I even went and took the plunge into The Brown Bunny because these are the only two major, well, I shouldn't say major, but the two films that got festival plays and
there's only two of his movies that have actually been released.
Yeah.
Released, yeah.
Promises, because Promises Written in Water played at Venice and TIFF, and then he
Yeah.
just sort of like withheld it and like refuses to release it.
Yeah, and even as a kid, I heard about the controversy surrounding The Brown Bunny and about how Roger Ebert was like, this is the worst movie that ever played in the history of the Cannes Film Festival, 0 stars, and then he recut it, gave it 3 stars. And Brown Bunny is also completely different aesthetically in regards to this. And it also, for obvious reasons, made me deeply uncomfortable and conflicted, especially in regards to the infamous scene with Chloe Sevigny. And at the same time, I think there's an honesty here that is undeniably powerful in both of these films for different reasons, just about, like we've talked about, you know, childhood trauma with this film, and I think in The Brown Bunny especially damaged male psyche and masculinity in a way where he might be a horrible person in real life. But, I mean, sometimes we watch movies for windows into perspectives that are not our own. And sometimes I think it's important to get out of your bubble. In my case, I feel like I have a very privileged bubble in this type of circumstance, and I can't deny that, mirroring what everybody said in regards to Buffalo 66 specifically, I found this movie to be very funny, very nakedly vulnerable in shocking ways, and on top of that, very visually arresting in other ways. Like, I mean, I was kind of stunned by how many types of innovative ways were used to fill the frame. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but there's we'll get into it, I'm sure, but there's at one point, there's a license plate that has like, 3 numbers like a normal license plate and then Ozu next to it. And then I was just like, that can't be a coincidence, right? And then we get into the scenes where he takes Christina Ricci home to his family, and they're framed like, Ozu films, or clearly inspired by Ozu films. And I couldn't help, in regards to what you were saying, Michael, about this is the way independent films used to be, and how this premiered at Sundance. I apologize in advance, Brandon. I know you like this movie, but I couldn't help but think about how I saw Cha-Cha Real Smooth recently, which was bought out for $15 million at Sundance this year, and Cooper Raiff is the writer and director and star of that, and it's a film in which he has, in my opinion, I'm just saying this is completely from my perspective, no interest in how to frame a compelling shot or tell a story about himself that is in any way harsh on himself, and is essentially a film in which he gets everybody, whether it's his character or himself, and I think there's barely a filter there about how much everybody loves him, and there is something striking in how Vincent Gallo in this film and in The Brown Bunny has made films about horrible assholes, of which I think he probably is one, and full of self-loathing, and they are both entirely narcissistic. They're both entirely self-centered in certain ways, but I mean, it's a singular vision. Like, I can think of, obviously there are tons of influences, but I can't think of another movie that looks like this, especially from 1998, really.
No.
No.
And also, you were bringing up Cooper Raiff because he also is selling his sperm for $1 million.
They could be acting in Daily Wire movies 20 years from now.
But it is like, I mean, that's what, like 24 years ago this movie came out, and now these types of, I'm sorry, milquetoast, sanitized, like, pat myself on the back. I'm sorry. It's shocking that...
We need to be mean for a second. We can also say that maybe he's not great at framing marketing, considering his last movie was called Shithouse, and this one is called Cha-Cha Real Smooth.
Even people who like those movies have like said like, he's not so good at titles. This maybe he should hand it over to someone else.
No, I know. We couldn't.
Yeah,
let this
I know.
For sure. Yeah.
We couldn't.
Yeah.
Have you heard what his next movie's called? It's called Wobble With It, and then parentheses Wobble With It. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, when I recommended Shithouse to my parents, like I said, like, no, I'm gonna recommend a movie. I think you'll like it, but you're gonna make a face when I say it. And they're like, oh, what's it gonna be? And I'm like, Shithouse is what it's called. And then my mom made a face. And I'm like, see, what did I tell you? It's like,
yeah. And to be entirely fair, it's not like something I thought of the entire time where I was comparing this to Cha-Cha Real Smoother. I haven't seen Shithouse, but I couldn't, even just on its own terms, I was just like, God damn it, I can't deny the artistry here. And like Michael, I was like, I fucking hate this guy. But at the same time, every single turn this film takes is not one I was expecting, both in terms of how it, just in terms of how it tells its story visually, and also in terms of just plot beats. Like, just every single time, I was kind of just, Bryden, you said thrown on your ass. I mean, I'll double that. Like, it really took me for a loop, and I could not believe how much I actually enjoyed this, and and I'm still kind of dealing with that. He kind of is now in line with someone like David Mamet, where I'm like, you're a piece of shit, but god damn it, you're a fucking artist, and I can't deny that. If that makes any sense.
But Mamet has none of the finesse behind the camera.
It's a different type of finesse, but Spartan, I think, is when it took him several films, but I think Spartan, he has a real eye behind a real feel for how to engross the viewer with certain compositions in ways that I think are very idiosyncratic, in the ways that this film, like, just like, in an age where in 2020, we're in 2022 right now, where so many films feel the same. I can't think of another film that feels exactly like this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting you mentioned Cooper Raiff, because I think something that the exact thing I realized, like, the thing that I've started to get clarity about is the thing that maybe I'm wrestling about. So I've obviously done really well with wrestling with this. I think Cooper Raiff, or, someone like, listen up, Philip.
Alex Ross Perry. Who I like. I like Alex Ross Perry, actually.
I do to an extent as well, but I think there's something very interesting about this film's relationship to self-indulgence. Like, I would personally say that a good amount of these, defiantly independent movies, often set in New York, they feel masturbatory quite a bit. And this somehow doesn't, despite having a kitchen sink approach to filmmaking. Like, the thing about Mamet is, I do quite like Spartan, and I like a lot of kind of script reveals and rug pulls it does, but it's still not the type of film where I was like, if I was slouching or something, that I would stand up straight immediately and be like, oh, you just did a little one little touch that came to mind is I think it's Denny's. It's a diner they go to.
Yeah, it's Denny's. It's Denny's, yeah.
And so there's an attendant who takes them to this booth, and then it just the smallest pan, and the waitress is right there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so many things that the filmmaking is so fluid and lucid, even as what you're watching, it's a force of nature. Like, he's a dormant volcano feels too nice, because that suggests that he's ever dormant. Like, he's just a repeatedly, he's like a throbbing boil. Yeah. I was gonna make a joke actually in the review that Bryden mentioned, was like, as on the nose as it is, like, he's a gutter ball of a human being.
Oh my gosh.
Like, he's someone who, whatever trajectory they wanted, they still can't find that groove. Like, I think there's something super, that bowling scene is so important to me, I think, for understanding him as a person.
That's all he has in life.
Yes.
That's it.
And it's not only like that as like a concrete thing that he has, but here is something where he is in the pocket, where he is, fully in a place, and where he feels truly at home for a moment until he's not. And he's just like thrown back into the world. And so I think that's what's so interesting to me about how this is self-indulgent, is because on some level, some of the characterization decisions, they do sometimes just feel like they are trying to be the opposite of what you expect, too much, in terms of alternating between this ability to be intimate and then this ability to be like just incredibly vicious. And at some point, I didn't necessarily lose empathy for him, but I was like, how many more times can Christina Ricci, Layla massage his ego here? And it is like, and she's doing something really interesting here. And we see her enter her own dream worlds. I mean, Brian already mentioned in the trivia the tap dance. The tap dancing sequence it's like a goddamn near transcendent.
Yes.
Like, it's the type of thing, I guess it's very Lynchian on some level. It could remind you of Silencio and Mulholland Drive or Blue Velvet. Like, it is that type of, impromptu karaoke thing where you just feel fully in the moment. So I think that's what's so interesting to me is, on some level, this is probably a lot who Vincent Gallo actually is. On some level,
even though he has said, he's like, no, obviously that's not me, and I'm like, is it? No.
It's like
he said at the end, him in the donut shop, he says, that's me on a good day, and I was like, yep, okay.
Yeah, and Vincent Gallo in real life is like his character in this movie if he didn't have the come to Jesus moment at the end. It's like no, everyone else is wrong and I'm right. That's how it is.
Yeah,
Vincent Gallo probably like harasses Kevin Corrigan just like he does in this movie. Yeah, I mean, just calls him up. He's just like, hey fucking guy from Grounded for Life.
Both of his films in different ways feel like endurance tests too, because. Like, his character in this is just so abrasive and hostile and just self-centered, and it dares you to stick with them. It dares you to stick with him for the longest time. And I think I agree with you, Kevin. I thought a lot about. I wrestled with the Christina Ricci character in that. Yeah, and what you said too, Michael, of how patient can she really be with this guy? I mean. It's
because she sees right through his bullshit.
Yeah, but then I also came around to she's stronger than I would be in this situation because she sees right through his bullshit and is able to give him the verbal cues to get him to stick around. But I also feel like she's bored with her own life in a way that's like, this is more interesting. And I love that there's no scene where she talks about her backstory or what's going on with her, which I know a lot of people can list as a criticism to not fleshing her out. I wrestled with this back and forth and still have weird feelings I'm, going back and forth about with this, because she is in one way that ideal dream girl, and at the same time never ever behaves in a way that you would expect a normal stock movie character to behave. And it's also interesting in that the Brown Bunny, and a lot of people have written about this, for 70 minutes of the Brown Bunny, you are just stuck with him in that fucking car, and he picks up women, and they're just like, what's your deal? Like, and then he's usually kind of awful to them, and then the real movie doesn't really come in until the last 20 minutes. I feel like Vincent Gallo...
Love watching a movie where it starts at the end. That's cool.
And again, I'm still wrestling with all these feelings towards both movies, but I can't deny that, like, I think it's funny how, like, it in the back of my head, I was like, of course he loves Trump, because he is a weird version where he lays himself out bare for everyone to see, and then when people are like, what an asshole, he just lashes out and does the exact same things that, like, Trump will say. Except that Trump's never let his guard down, whereas Vincent Gallo does. And I feel like a lot of this is, do we know if he had a fucked up childhood? Because this feels like it comes from a really personal place.
From that 2018 essay or whatever, diary entry, whatever it was, he said, the only thing that was real about Buffalo 66 was that's exactly what my parents were like.
Yeah, like, it feels
authentic. So like said that they wish he wasn't born, like that kind of thing. Like, holy shit, that is,
I'm sure. Which is also like gasp worthy, and also, it's so darkly funny. But that's the thing, is like,
she names him after her favorite football team, like.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny when she says like, oh, I love Billy Brown. It's like, which one? And then like she says like, your son. He's like, and then like he just sort of like throws up his hands, like, yeah.
I think he's the most handsome man in the world. Who is your son? Really?
Yeah. And then he's very deliberately framed off to the side, but he's basically shut out of his own family dinner. Yeah, it's so perfect. Anyways, Charlie, go ahead.
It basically, it feels so authentic, even in the broader, darkly comic scenes that could be criticized. It feels like it comes from a place of real vulnerability and real pain. And if you don't want to empathize with this guy, I don't blame you. I'm not saying everyone go run out and watch Vincent Gallo movies, because it's an endurance test, as I mentioned, in certain ways. And like, but I'm also very glad that we got to cover it on this show, because it did force me to get out of my comfort zone and wrestle with a character and a persona that I don't always like to be around in real life, with an artist that I don't always want to dive into. Like, again, like, I don't know how long it would have taken me to see this movie if we didn't have to cover it for the show, but I'm so glad we did, because this is kind of why movies like this are important. You need to get out of your comfort zone and out of your bubble a little bit. And especially after, I mean, the pandemic, where I've just wanted nothing but like junk food for so long. Like, this actually did provide me with a big challenge personally, and in terms of like, just, I feel like I'm going in circles at this point, but yeah, I'm glad this movie pushed me to wrestle with certain things, because it's so rare that movies actually force you to do that these days. I don't know. I'm feeling like I'm such a sappy cliche right now.
No.
Also, my dogs are barking in the background, so I apologize about that.
I feel like the really hard thing here is I'm trying so hard to get away from his persona, and when you zoom,
but you
and when you
can't.
magnify, when you magnify the filmmaking too, like if you want to even just talk about like Manic Pixie Dream Girl, which, like, you know, existed because of things that followed this.
Yeah,
like
Nathan
at
Raven
Sundance
coined that after Elizabethtown, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Exactly.
Was it Elizabethtown?
I think it was Elizabethtown.
It was the that when he was writing about his My World of Flops. That was the
My World of Flops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then, anyway, like, even it's reductive, but I think on some level, even that archetype is like interesting to talk about in relation with this movie. So, like, you know, for every time you're like, oh, this is gratuitous, then you're like, okay, but there's a counter here completely. Like, you think about, for instance, okay, so Ricci, they're playing at certain times with like almost this Lolita persona. They're playing with this hypersexualized thing, but we never see her, you know, there's no like glamour shots of her nude. Mm-hmm. The bathtub scene is so notable for the fact that he's in the fetal position and she's like, I'm cold, and then it's edited as, you know, just kind of a like an episodic sight gag where then she's in the water after she said she wasn't gonna be. But like, even then, the bed scene, I mean, it's, when you look at those scenes, it's, on some level, it is really funny. And I think this is kind of related to what you were saying, Kevin, in the sense that, like, it's not only that she sees through his bullshit, but it's like every time that she tries to convince him that he's not a piece of shit, he's like, fuck you. Like, it's like, and it's like, the funny thing is when she's describing the CIA thing, like,
so good.
she's giving like a world-class performance on some level. And it's like, that is, I think that's what is so weird about this, is I think this is kind of my last thought, is like, I feel like we've seen a lot of genre riffs that were very aware this is a riff. Here are, you know, even if there's an Ozu license plate in this, I don't feel like it's, you know, it's not a pastiche. It's not Lynch. It's not Tarantino.
No.
Like, despite all of those things looming large, it's not that. Like, it's closer to like Nicholas Ray and like They Live by Night was something I was thinking about a decent amount during it.
Yeah.
And I just think that is what is so weird to wrestle with when you magnify this, because you have something that is so overwhelmingly controlled, like just suffocatingly meticulous. And you're aware of it, and that's not a bad thing. But this movie's written, produced, directed, edited, scored. Is that it? I think there's one. Is there one more?
The editor is Curtis Clayton. Is their name?
Oh shit!
I'm
sorry.
No, it's fine.
And he also it's coming from him, so take it with a grain of salt. He was just like, fucking Lancecord didn't do anything. I fucking
Yeah, called
did
him
all. He had
button
no
pusher.
ideas.
Yeah. But, like, if you've seen Lancecor's other movies, you're like, yeah, I can believe that guy shot it, because he's a good DP. Like, it's...
Yeah.
It's a great, yeah.
I'm
No,
sure.
I mean-
I'm sure he had a lot of ideas for the shots and whatnot, but it's not like Lancecord was a button pusher. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, not even bringing in anything with that persona. Just the fact that he is that person. Objectively, he is that person who is 1,000% involved with this movie. And that is what I struggle with without even getting into that persona. This idea that it is supposed to be a takedown of this narcissist, that it is supposed to be incredibly self-aware. But then the filmmaking in a certain sense, has its cake and eats it. I guess I haven't said this, but I guess I found the ending of this very unconvincing. Am I alone in that?
We kind of did that in Sync, Charlie.
I will say I bought what happens right before it. I actually bought it, where I was like, and then it actually took me aback that it didn't commit to what I found to be a predictable ending. And then I also have a lot of feelings about the ending, which we can get into, that I don't know if I buy it either, but I'm glad it went that direction as opposed to the direction that it initially starts to go down. If that makes any sense.
I will also say, I think I can take the ending too, because it's like, even though he has like a moment where he decides to not go down the path that he's been hurtling towards, he still is retaining some of his self. Like, he still says to Rocky, he says, like, if you touch my stuff, I'm gonna karate chop you in the head or whatever. It's like, okay, so he's still that guy who's just like super aggro all the time or whatever. And, like the coffee shop scene, like, he is like super, I mean, he's nice, but it's like a super like aggressive niceness and everything.
Yeah.
And it's like where it's like people don't necessarily know how to take it and everything. And like he's like saying to the guy, he's like, here, you get a cookie, but it's only for your girlfriend, not for you, or whatever. And like
but then it also seems like in that scene he's gonna like stiff the guy too. Like once he said $4, I'm like, please have $4. Just give this guy fucking $4.
I think that's what made the ending work for me. Is that he has an epiphany and not a complete transformation.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we get into the plot, there was a review that I read that said, "Say what you will about Vincent Gallo, but goddamn, he's good at bowling." I was like, "Yeah, dude, he really is."
Yeah. But I loved when Ricci just gets like. Is it 3 strikes or 2 strikes in a row? And he's like, "Oh, of course."
Yeah.
Like after he loses his mojo, yeah.
Let's get into the plot. Having just served 5 years in prison, Billy Brown, played by Vincent Gallo, returns home to Buffalo, New York, and is prepared to meet with his parents, who don't know he's been in prison. He kidnaps Layla, played by Ricci, a tap dancer, and forces her to pretend to be his wife in front of his parents. He gives her the name Wendy Balson. The funny thing about this is that I feel like since we don't have any backstory or whatnot, I thought it was very serious how it feels like she kind of like was just like, let me just go to a tap dancing class today, because like everybody is like in their tap dancing uniforms and whatnot, and they all look really confident. She's like looking at them, like trying to catch up with them and whatnot. Not saying that she's not a tap dancer, because obviously is in the later scene, but I think that feeds into her is that she's also lost, that she maybe just picked up today. It was like, I'm going to go to a class. I don't know what they wear or anything like that. When they meet with Billy's parents, Ben Gazzaro and Angelica Houston, Layla sees that the relationship between them is very dysfunctional and sees Billy's own mother forgetting that he has a chocolate allergy and that his father behaves inappropriately towards her. She finds out Billy's mother has never missed a Buffaloes game except in 1966 on the day that Billy was born. In a flashback, it is revealed that Billy once placed a reckless $10,000 bet on the Bills to win the Super Bowl 25 when they lost. The bookie, played by Mickey Rourke, forced Billy to clear his death by confessing to a crime he didn't commit, resulting in his time served in prison. Now Billy seeks revenge on Scott Wood, the kicker who lost the game. That entire flashback where Kevin Corrigan comes in and whatnot, and then it's just like, and then Mickey Rourke is just like, if you ever have this chance again, don't bet on the Bills. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And Rourke too, when he says like, when I want to do evil, I just want to throw up. And he just sort of like splays out his hands like that. I mean, it's just like working like so good with the
good.
gestures and
Yeah.
everything. It's and I also love the other detail is like when Scott Wood, when you actually get to meet him a little bit. First, you meet him in like the voicemail where he says like, "Hey, it's like Scott Wood. Sorry I missed that field goal. I know you're all really mad at me, but you can come to my strip club or whatever." Like it's just like the suggestion of this guy's like just must be fucking miserable like half the time in his life because just everyone hates him for this one mistake he made. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or also he's just literally just like, I'm gonna use my fame is just that I suck and I'm just gonna lean into it. It's just like I got a strip club because of it. Solid Gold. Which is that's the most perfect fake strip club name.
Yes.
As they live his what was that? I forget who was saying it, but it was just like very with the plot summary and whatnot. It's just like, oh, you think the entire movie is gonna take place at his parents' house? They like leave his parents' house like 40 minutes in. So even that is very unconventional, but as they leave his parents' house, Billy scolds Layla for telling an obvious lie to his father about how he's in the CIA and then decide to go bowling. Here, Billy shows off his expertise at the sport, and Layla gives a tap dance routine to King Crimson's Moonchild. The two use a photo booth to take pictures, quote, spanning time, which this entire scene is fucking hilarious. We're a couple spanning time.
No.
Okay?
Do you think that's like a malapropism? Like he thinks that's like the same as spending time or spanning time? I mean, like that's what I was thinking.
I don't know.
Because I don't know. I have like I know some people who like sometimes they'll like say things. I'm like, you're not pronouncing that correctly. Like there was like a person who like said like, oh, it's a slice of life film, and I like eventually had to say to them, I think like it's slice of life, not splice. So like I've never actually think spanning time, spending time. It's like he heard it once and like misheard it, and it's like, but yeah.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah. Yeah, I could totally see that. I realized the one thing I wanted to say is I think it's so great. We already mentioned that Jan Michael Vincent is wonderful as this bowling owner.
Such
or
a weird
manager.
relationship.
But a relationship that in like a minute tells you like, oh, this is one of the people he's closest to in his whole life. And this guy knows nothing about him because she's originally like, oh, I'm his wife, and then he's like, oh no, I just picked her up hitchhiking, you know, I'll throw her away, as in like, and that to me suggests so much about that he's probably just had all of these dumb stories about hookups and everything to this bowling alley to try to
that guy buys
lift
his
yourself
bullshit.
up. Yes, for sure.
Him and Goon are the people that he can spin his bullshit and they'll believe him.
And it's like,
or not even buy it, but just like they don't know anything else on a certain level.
Or like it's an arrangement. I mean, like, you know, the way that like, you know, Gallo or Billy is telling like Layla that like he's sort of treating her like, doesn't he like at one point say like you're an actress and everything, like give like the best performance, like, and then like, you know, it's almost like when he's like talking to Jan Michael Vincent, he says like, you're my friend, right? He keeps like, he always has like a tendency to repeat things very insistently. It's like he's giving kind of directions, and it's like this guy is like on the same wavelength with him as like this is the arrangement that we'll have, and it's like totally, you know, we'll keep it like that. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. After bullying Billy and Layla visit a diner where Billy encounters the real Wendy Balsam, played by Roseanne Arquette, a girl he used to have a crush on in middle school, who is now happily in a relationship with another man. This entire scene is so awkward, and Arquette is so good at playing this.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Oh man, just where he's obviously not trying to see her, and she's just like, hey, and she doesn't get the hint, and she's just like, hey, don't I? It's just like, transport me out of this.
Yeah,
every time I looked out my window, I'd see you walking by. Like, oh god.
Yeah, I had a friend who lived there.
Yeah.
And I also love the way that scene ends, where like after like Gallo like lashes out at Richie and she starts like crying, and it's like really sad, and like the way she like spits back at him like, yo, fuck you and everything, like because she's like so composed like throughout so much of the movie and everything. But then Roseanne Arquette, she says like, she's like looking over in the background, she's like crying, like she says like she's crying, sort of mouths it, and then like sort of waves her hand and everything. It's just like sort of the flippancy of it. It's just like so. It's like such like a devastating button on that scene where it's just like this is just a moment that that couple will be witnessing, and then they'll be back to their own cushy lives. Like,
right, because even after Wendy stops talking to them, and then it's just Layla and Billy talking and whatnot, you can still see Roseanne Arquette at the background, like looking at them and smiling and laughing and whatnot, and that just made it even more just.
Her fiance even like gets into the same side of the booth, and they seem like they're going at it at one point. And it's so uncomfortable. Yeah.
It showed like a casualness to that cruelty as well.
Yes.
Like it's not only like flippancy, but it's like, oh, this woman has definitely tried to make people feel small before.
And her husband too. He's like laughing when he's inviting them for dinner. It's like he doesn't believe it's serious for like a second.
Well, since you went to elementary school together, do you want to sit with us? Like, it's like that type of yeah. Ugh.
I totally thought it was like they were having like he was a married dude in an affair. Like that's the energy
That's
it communicated to me.
Like this is my
that what you
quote
guys
unquote
got as well?
fiance. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the bus scene from Dogma. Yeah. Are you married to her? Not that it's any of your fucking business, but no. Yeah. Billy leaves Layla alone in the diner after a brief argument, but regretting his outburst, returns and apologizes to her. Billy and Layla check into a motel where Billy and Layla have a deep conversation and eventually admit that they have fallen in love with each other and they both go to sleep. Throughout all of this, Billy is waiting until like 3 a.m. whenever the guy is going to be 2. Yeah.
Sorry.
Because a few hours after midnight, he wakes up and he's about to leave to exact his revenge on Wood. When Layla awakens, despite Layla's doubts that he'll return in proclamation of her love for him, he leaves, lying to her that he'll return in a few minutes with hot chocolate for her. Shortly after leaving Layla at the motel, Billy finds Scott Wood, now the owner of a topless bar, at Wood's own bar. He walks over to Wood's table and shoots him in the head before shooting himself. His parents are then shown sitting by his grave, with his mother showing more interest in a Buffaloes game on the radio than her own son's death. However, this is all shown to be inside of Billy's mind. Billy leaves the bar without killing Wood, realizing that in Layla he has finally found a person who truly loves him. After making amends with his friend Goon, played by Kevin Corrigan, on a payphone, the film ends with Billy elatedly buying Layla her hot chocolate and a heart-shaped cookie, and buying another for a man sitting nearby who tells him he has a girlfriend before returning to Layla at the motel.
Did anyone start to think during the funeral scene that turns out not to be real, okay, this is a little broad now, and then it actually, by revealing that it's not real, that actually made so much sense and is actually, like, in retrospect, a really darkly funny joke? Because I was just like, oh, come on, like, they're caricatures, sort of, but, like, not to this extent. And then you're like, oh, wait, of course he'd be imagining that. Like,
I think Keith Phipps said this in AV Club, but he said every character in this movie could have been out of Blue Velvet.
Like, it feels like that.
Every character.
Well, the lip syncing scene with Ben Gazzara, I'm sure someone has mentioned that seems like almost like the Roy Orbison in Dream scene from Blue Velvet.
In Dreams, yeah.
Sure. But those very specific personas in terms of how they interact with people, like it's just a collection of just kind of like odious tics in a sense. Like it's very strange, but also not a caricature. Yeah, like by all accounts, this should be so much broader than it is.
But it plays it so sincerely. I mean, that's the thing too. Like the phone scene with Corrigan near the end, where Gallo is like just barely keeping it together, as like he's leaving his bowling stuff behind, and like he's like his voice, he's like clenching his face and everything, trying to not cry and everything. It's like so unbelievably sad and everything, and like and Corrigan plays it so well, where he is like genuinely sympathetic to his friend's plight.
You're not gonna do something bad, Billy. You're not gonna do it, are you? Yeah.
Well, I love that every other character. I mean, that scene with Christina Ricci in the hotel room, where she knows exactly what's going on. She knows, like, and
oh yeah,
and I think she is being sincere. It's fascinating how I think she's not being 100% honest and being like, you're the nicest person I've ever known, especially because she just said some horrible things to her at Denny's and she just told him to fuck off. But she's saying exactly what he knows he needs to hear in order to protect him in a weird way. And it's that thing that I wrestled with going back and forth, where I'm like, is this a character that is written specifically so the protagonist has that sort of, as we've mentioned numerous times, that manic pixie dream girl energy that is necessary for the plot to move forward? Or am I robbing this character of any agency by just lumping her into that category in order to actually reveal layers that she is doing anything in her power to protect him, and also eradicating any sense of genuine feelings that she has for me, even if they're over exaggerated or hyperbolic. And ultimately where I come down to it is two things can be true. Like, I think that it's a bit of both. One other detail that I thought was very funny was when, and I'm sorry, I know I left for a bit when we started the plot synopsis, I had to leave the room for a sec, but when she first goes to his parents' house, they're like, "Can I get you a drink, honey?" And she's like, "Can I have a rum and coke?" And they're like, "Wait, what, honey? I mean a ginger ale?" Like, and even Vincent Gallo just looking like, "Did you really fucking ask my mom that?" Like, and then from that point on, she only orders hot chocolate, which is such an innocent, childlike drink to get.
That's what I was thinking too. Because she says she's 25, right?
I think.
Yeah, well, Gallo also says, like, we met in high school, and I'm like thinking, there's no way you look like you were the same age and everything. It's like...
Because he was like 40-something when they made this.
Yeah.
I think one other wrinkle, too, that I found really interesting is the plot only moves forward in payphone conversations.
Oh, shit.
The only way things move forward is when they're talking. Like, in a sense... Like, nothing that Billy and Layla say to each other has any reflection on the general narrative. Like, they are just, like, constantly, like, you know, doing their version of, like, whiling away the hours. Like, everything is just a means to an end, in a sense, which goes back to, I guess... Shoot, I forgot who said it was transactional. It was Kevin or Bryden. I'm not sure which of you said it. But there's just such a transactional quality to
that sounds way too
so much
smart
of their
for me to
relationships.
Well, in the sense of like an arrangement, sort of. I think that maybe that's what I was talking about with the young Michael Vincent character for sure. That's definitely that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good touch that she says rum and coke and then only asks for hot chocolate. If it was essential to the narrative, I might be less forgiving of it, but it feels so impulsive in the moment. And like, I think you could just as well have an interpretation where Billy's like, I'm not any better than this naked dude surrounded by a harem in this strip club. Why is he nude? Why is he nude?
Because it's 2:00 in the morning, man. I don't know. I think it's also funny that as soon as they leave the house, that's when Christina Ricci is kind of in power now, because she was like, I want to stop and get a hot chocolate. He's like, what? And then eventually they fucking do. So
yeah,
she was like, I did. She was like, I did what you asked me to do, and now I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah. It's also interesting you mentioned, Michael, because this was something that stuck out to me about the phone conversations. At the end, it's like, the ending is like, it's the contradictions that sort of like make it like, that make it interesting, where like it is like, yes, he rejects the violent fantasy and trades it in for another one. And it's interesting that all the other that it's only his side of the conversation that you hear when he's talking with Rocky on the phone with Kevin Corrigan. He's saying like, guess what? I met a girl. It's just his side of the conversation. You're not really hearing anything else. Well, I mean,
that's a great point.
Well, I guess you do hear just his side, I think, when he first calls his mom and he's like telling her to turn that to TV or whatever. But it's interesting how it's like, it is almost like, yes, he doesn't take the violent path, and that's a nice bit of hope and everything. But it is also like, how much has he really changed? And also, how long will he be able to sustain this sort of charade and everything? How much will it be sincere? I don't know.
And how much of that has to do with the fact that he was an only child in a household raised by parents who constantly talk over him at all times.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting too.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
this movie, it's good.
Yeah.
Keep talking about it. It just keeps going up.
It's just. I think, like, I can't... I mean, obviously, it's the timing. I don't know if I would have related them, but just, like, thinking about this in relation to Jesus' son is just... It was very interesting, because at certain points I was like, oh, is he also an addict? Like, is he also into drugs? Because there are comparisons in the temperaments of especially Samantha Morton and someone like... Vincent Gallo, and I think that's that's super interesting that this type of character, I don't know, like it's this. I want to mention something briefly we talked about before we started. So one of the most revealing interviews that I found was not with a big publication, but with a small Buffalo newspaper.
The Daily Beast?
And the Daily, it is the Public something. Mm-hmm. The Daily Public. That's what it's called. And this is a Buffalo newspaper.
That is a fake newspaper name. The Daily Public. might as well just be called The News. Yeah.
And this was March 30th, 2015. And it is by far the kindest interview I've seen Gallo give to someone. And I want to mention that because I'd really like to talk about the portrayal of Buffalo in this movie. Because it sure seems to show Buffalo as kind of this very scuzzy town. The landmarks are...
God, I want to live in it, though. Oh, it looks so cold.
I've heard it's very affordable to live there. I was talking with my brother recently. He said, like, yeah, you could, like, buy a house out there in Buffalo, and, like, it would be, like, super affordable. I'm like, should I move to Buffalo? Like,
yeah, let's do
it. Dan Mecca grew up in Buffalo. I think Jordan Ropp did as well.
Oh, cool.
As far as... as I know Dan Mecca is a friend of the show, but
I was really quick. I was gonna say you were talking about similarities of or saying if Gallo could be like an addict or something. I would say no to that because whenever he gets out of his delusion of the strip club and Wood hands him a shot, he doesn't even take the shot.
Yeah. And
if he was any type of addict, he'd still take the shot and then leave.
And on top of that,
good point.
Without spoiling too much, Chloe Sevigny's character in The Brown Bunny is an addict, and his character, in the way that as the movie unfolds, you find out he has some very strong feelings towards that character being an addict. It's not even explicitly said, but you're kind of meant to pick up on that. The other thing I will say is, I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Michael, is that the kindest interview he gave is one that was Buffalo located. And we just watched a clip that I sent to all of us about Roger Ebert talking to Gallo after he saw the recut version of The Brown Bunny. And now that you bring this up, he mentions to Roger Ebert, like, when you called The Brown Bunny the worst film in the history of the Cannes Film Festival, everyone heard about it. Even my family in Buffalo heard about it. So he clearly has some ties for... It's clear that he is someone who is consistently... he's clearly sensitive and about even how everyone views him, including from when he was a kid. Like, it's clear that he is almost hyper aware and almost overly sensitive to how people view him throughout his life, which is very interesting to me because it makes so much sense. And even though he'll lash out and say the most edgelordy, stupid shit, it feels like a reflexive knee-jerk thing to me, where I guess this goes beyond the movie, but it is like, I guess why I find his film so interesting, and why when you read all the terrible things he says, is like, I feel like he does lay out just so many things, so many vulnerabilities, so many parts of himself that he will not talk about, even with people intimately in public. At least that's what I'm getting, and that he lays it out through his art, and then when people respond negatively to it, he lashes out as if he was a child, much like how his character in Buffalo 66 lashes out as if he were a child, which is why I think it's impossible to, as we talked about, separate the art from the artist here, and how much of this is fiction and how much of it is, semi-autobiographical, which obviously I'm not saying this is all semi-autobiographical. It's just, I don't know if that was a tangent that made any sense, but
no, like, it does make sense. I mean, the movie could definitely be seen as, like, an outlet for, like, any demons that he has. The problem is that, like, maybe the demons were not just left in the film, given that he's like, it'd be the kind of, an ideal scenario would be like, he'd purge all his feelings in this movie, and he'd be be a great movie. Still is a great movie and everything, but it'd be the kind of thing where it's like, all right, cool, now I can be chill in my real life or whatever. And then it's like, well, no, it's
no.
It still carries that aggro energy into his real life.
It's like if somebody gives him a negative review, it feels like a stab in the back. Like, I told you all of my most intimate secrets. How dare you go behind my back? It's like, and that almost feels like transactional, to use that word. Is like, I told you all of my everything I have that is that I am self-conscious about, and I laid it out bare, and how dare you tell me that what I did tell you is like awful,
it's it's Owen Wilson and Zoolander, and that was like, this guy's really hurting me, and it hurt. It's like, I told you in my film I was an asshole, and then you told me I was an asshole? You're an asshole!
I mean, the one thing that really was, like, the one big thing, and that, I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but the homophobia that happens in the first act, where I was he's
just about to mention
it's literally almost the first thing, besides saying, where's the bathroom? That's like the first thing he says. It's just the F word, like 9 times. And then he also writes in that the guy has to comment that he has a huge dick.
Huge
and
dick.
Like,
that's the
on.
one thing where I was just like, okay, I get what you're doing and that you're making me dislike you. And clearly he is not endorsing. And I'm not even saying, to me that's, like, Vincent Gallo is purposely adding this to be like, this is not okay. But do you feel this way? Because I think you do. I think but there's an intimacy.
It's an easy way to hate the character that we would never do nowadays.
Yeah.
But,
you would never...
It is even 2 to 3 minutes too. It's not immediate. Like, you're right that, like, he just looks for the bathroom for a while, but he looks for quite a while, and you don't get this, like, antagonistic reflex until we're in the bathroom. Like, it is almost like you get a counter to that person for a few minutes. Like, it did. I mean, it's
never related to a scene more. Just trying to find a place to piss.
Oh my god, it's so funny.
Especially in New York.
There's something to him.
When he goes behind the car, too. Oh my god.
It starts to back up. She walks into the car and starts to back up. It's so funny.
That's
I'm sorry, Brandon.
No,
I interrupted.
You're all right that this is very funny. But it also is interesting that, like, it adds to, like, sort of, it is almost like kind of making it empathetic, I think, too, where he's just out of prison and he's still being treated, like, not very well and everything, where, like, he comes in and he's just like, I just need to use the bathroom, and the guy doesn't even, like, it's like the faceless cafe owner's like, we're closed, you're not using this bathroom or whatever, and, like, shuts him out, and, like, but then, and then, like, he erodes some of that empathy by being homophobic. I will say, obviously don't use those words and everything, but I will say Gallo was very funny, I think, in the physical way where he's just, like, stamping around and everything, looking just so ridiculous and everything. Like, there is, like, just this very, like, wiry energy to him where he's just, like, spinning around on his heels and everything. He never looks cool.
I do love that whenever he gets Christina Ricci in the car and whatnot, and he drives, and he's like, pull over here, and he pees behind a tree, and he was just like, okay, I'd like to apologize. I was like, my first thought was like, dog, you ever need to piss so bad you just turned into a homophobe?
It's like when Roseanne Barr said that, like, Ambien made her racist or something like that.
You ever been so sleepy you just turned into a racist?
I mean, it is that thing where it is also like, he would not have put that in if he didn't. He would not put that scene in if he meant for that to be relatable in a likable way. You know what I mean? Even in 1998. That's what's complicated about that scene is I hate the fact that the character goes, it's so big, like, we don't need that. That's the one part of that scene that I was just like, oh, come on. But at the same time, I'm like, it goes with what I'm trying to say, or what I think he's saying here is, like, he has ugly sides of him, and he might hate that part of himself too, but it's there. And I will say this. I do not appreciate the homophobia, but I do appreciate that he's at least laying it out bare for us, as opposed to being, like, tolerant of it per se, and then we find out later about something like that in his personal life, if that makes any sense. I know that sounds like,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think to Brian, do you have something?
Well, couple of things. Also, like, it's believable that a guy who is that age grew up with, like, parents who were maybe, like, of that generation, would maybe, like, he would come up with those attitudes and anything where that was, like, a common word. Also,
Especially in 1998, that word was getting thrown around way more.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly.
Yes, and is it? This might be a bit of a reach, but like the sort of like the masculinity where he is just constantly on the defensive, and also maybe wielding that slur. Do you think? Because we don't get a whole lot of details about what his life in prison was like, but do you think maybe that is connected at all? Sort of like the defensiveness where he's just like always on guard, and also maybe where
probably
that's like maybe he's in scenarios where he is sexually threatened. I that's maybe a little,
or even worse. I mean,
yeah, I don't know if is that too much of a reach?
And I'm not. Yeah, and he's always on guard because even when he's outside his parents' house and he's like, "Can you just hold me? What are you doing? Don't touch me!" Like,
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be like flippant or like a glib or anything. I hope I'm not, but like, it's something that like maybe to think about. But yeah.
Well, both of his movies.
The prison context is. I think that's something I genuinely hadn't thought about.
Same.
Same.
And on top of that, it is. I know we're not reviewing The Brown Bunny here, but it is. I mean, we all know about the controversial unsimulated oral sex scene in The Brown Bunny. It's genuinely like I kind of expected, based on that controversy that I knew before seeing this movie, that Christina Ricci would be exploited, like both in terms, both by the camera and by the character himself. And in The Brown Bunny, he is also the entire 70 minutes he's driving around and still having difficulties connecting to women, and it is because he's hung up over this Chloe Sevigny character. And then that scene happens, and it's just as uncomfortable, and I you know, it's so complicated because Chloe Sevigny has gone on record saying she's at peace with it. You know, I don't know, I don't want to, you know, if that's what she said at the time, that's what she said at the time. I don't want to read too much into it and say what happened. But then there is a scene following that is also about just his discomfort with connecting with people intimately, both on a physical and a spiritual level, that I find to be, again, why I wrestle with him so much is he's being honest about ugly sides of masculinity in many ways. And it's very telling in ways that I've never seen before. And also it's very discomforting, and also but I can't, that's the thing about him and how he writes himself into all of his movies that I
when does it become so vivid that it no longer becomes, you know, great characterization?
Exactly. How much of this is fiction, how much of it is telling? And I think a lot of it is telling. I don't know where that line is drawn. And
there's very little.
What were you going to say, Michael? I'm sorry.
No, oh God, this has just been something we have, I've been talking about with so many people, including you guys outside this podcast, in terms of people like Abel Ferrara, which weirdly enough, Gallo is in Ferrara's films. And I'm not saying there's a direct correlation there, but rather it's very difficult to push away not even anything in terms of this being a vanity project. It's just like, it's very difficult to... Brendan just used the word demons. There are demons on screen here. Whether you want to say that's coming from his personal life or not, this is engaging with things that are consistently, uncompromisingly ugly.
Yes.
And that is, you know, like there were definitely times in this that reminded me of like Good Time. I already mentioned the Safdies, but like even that, the verisimilitude, is that, I've never said that word out loud.
Verisimilitude, yeah.
Speaking of posturing.
Michael, I have not used that word ever either, so you're in good company here.
The emotional realism of Good Time was something that's always stuck with me beyond the filmmaking. This even feels like next level. This feels in a way, like, it's totally understandable that as much as we keep trying to stay within the frame, it's so easy to go outside the frame and be like, all right, what do we, how do we just look at this as mechanics? How do we just look at this as a series of, often brilliant decisions working together?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash91. Once again, thank you for listening.